Hello, this is Dr. James Rovira, and we are continuing our study of logos for your rhetorical analysis paper with logical fallacies. And today is the last lecture we're giving related to the rhetorical analysis paper. So I'd like to remind you what you're doing with this paper because you're going to have to start working on it next week. The purpose of a rhetorical analysis paper is to analyze the rhetoric that someone uses. And if you remember, rhetoric is finding the available means of persuasion, and analysis is taking something and breaking it up into parts to see how the parts all work together to make the whole thing. So what we're going to do with this paper is, well, what you're going to do is analyze someone's rhetoric, meaning take apart how they try to persuade you of whatever point they're making, to see how effective it is, and to see what strategies they use, and to reflect on them. Because people try to convince us of things all the time, and we need tools to analyze how people are trying to convince us. And we're basing this for now on Aristotle's rhetoric. It's a very early manual of rhetoric from ancient Greece, written or recorded lectures there, lecture notes, 2,300 years ago. And these are still taught today, even in upper division business courses and other places. It hasn't ceased to be relevant or instructive. So if you recall, there were three main available means of persuasion according to Aristotle: ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is the audience's perception of the trustworthiness of the speaker. If you remember, it proceeds from shared beliefs and values, from virtue, intelligence, and goodwill, things like that. Pathos were emotional appeals. A speaker tries to manipulate your emotions to get you to vote a certain way, or to act a certain way, or to buy a certain product. And of course, we see this all the time. And logos, finally, is the logical structure of the argument, how someone uses reason to try to persuade you. So we looked at claims, reasons, warrants, supporting evidence, and qualifying statements last week. And today, under logos, we're going to look at logical fallacies, how people's logic goes wrong. So I'm going to run through this PowerPoint, and this will be what's already there in your learning management system. And what I'm going to have you do with this material is go out and find logical fallacies in the wild. Find a couple of them. I want you to, in your discussion forum post, describe two incidents where you encountered a logical fallacy. And I want you to describe the situation, the rhetorical context, what was going on. Was it a television ad? Or was it a private conversation or something like that? And then I want you to explain what logical fallacy is being exhibited and how that fits that particular logical fallacy. Okay, so let's get started with the PowerPoint. A nice cover. Look, it's water. Okay, so if you recall, in deductive reasoning, if you accept the assumptions, you're compelled to accept the conclusions. So a logical fallacy occurs when the conclusion does not logically follow from the assumptions provided. Formal logical fallacies occur, and we're going to study two kinds of logical fallacies today: formal and informal. Formal ones occur when the form of the argument is not correct. For example, consider the following syllogism: Socrates has two eyes, fish have two eyes, therefore Socrates is a fish. Sounds right to me, right? So compare that to our initial syllogism: Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. The form of the correct syllogism is A equals B, and B equals C, therefore A equals C. And you might recall that from your math classes, right? Formal logic does resemble math in a lot of ways, and it works very similar. It's a form of reasoning, and And logic is qualitative reasoning, and math is quantitative reasoning, but they share a lot in common. So if you look at the incorrect syllogism, Socrates has two eyes, fish have two eyes, Socrates is a fish, the form of the argument is different. A equals B, and C equals B, therefore A equals C. So the correct syllogism is A equals B and B equals C, therefore A equals C. And in the correct one, the middle term B moves from the predicate of the first sentence to the subject of the second. And I mean that literally in terms of grammar, all right? So that middle term is after the verb in the first sentence and before the verb in the second. So it's distributed from predicate to subject, okay? In the incorrect syllogism, the middle term remains in the predicate of both sentences. It comes after the verb in both cases. It is undistributed. And that means the form of the argument is incorrect. So this particular logical fallacy is called the fallacy of the undistributed middle. It's just one of many formal logical fallacies. Now, informal, and it's just one, okay? You can find bunches of them if you get a logic textbook or if you ever take formal logic. Now, informal logical fallacies occur. Oh, one more thing I want to tell you before I move on to informal logical fallacies. Just because the form of the argument is incorrect, that doesn't mean that the conclusion is incorrect, okay? When you identify an incorrectly formed argument, all you can say is that the conclusion doesn't follow from the assumptions, okay? But that doesn't mean the conclusion is false. Validity and truth and falsehood are two different things. So three different things, all right? They're different, okay? Validity has to do with the form of the argument, and truth and falsehood is another thing entirely, all right? You want to think about this as like you're taking math and your teacher tells you to show your work. So it's possible to show your work and get the steps wrong in the equation but arrive at the right answer. And it's possible to show your work and do all the steps right and accidentally write down the wrong. See what I mean? So formally valid reasoning is like writing all the steps correctly. That doesn't mean you wrote down the right answer, but if you did it all right, you would have, okay? And formally invalid reasoning means you wrote down the steps incorrectly. And you can still arrive at the right answer by mistake. That doesn't mean you reasoned correctly, okay? So you need to understand you're talking about validity when it comes to formal logic, not truth or falsehood. You have to examine the premises themselves to know if something is true or false, if a conclusion is true or false, okay? Because if you look at the incorrect form example I provided, it is true that Socrates had two eyes. It's true that most fish have two eyes. Okay, those are both true. That doesn't mean that Socrates is a fish, okay, or was a fish. So, you got to separate the idea of validity and truth or falsehood. All right, you can have true assumptions and arrive at a false conclusion through incorrect reasoning. You can have false assumptions and arrive at a true conclusion by accident. Okay, so just keep that separated in your mind. Know that all you're evaluating is the validity of someone's reasoning. And determining truth or falsehood is a different kind of thing. It has to do with examining the assumptions as well, okay? And there's simply no magic bullet for that. You just have to do the work and get the facts, okay? Reality is complex and difficult. And truth is hard to attain. You have to work for it. But it's worth the work, all right? Now we're moving on to informal logical fallacies. And they occur when the assumptions fail to support the conclusion in a very general sense. And there are two types. There are fallacies of relevance and fallacies of ambiguity. The fallacies of relevance, the assumptions are just completely irrelevant to the conclusion, okay? Or in other words, the conclusion and the assumptions are not related to each other in any meaningful or necessary way. All right, so I'm going to describe several in the following slides. The first fallacy of relevance is argument from the big stick. The only connection between the claim and the reason here is a threat. Eat your peas or you won't be allowed to play video games tonight, okay? While it is true that you should eat your peas, that actually has nothing to do with playing video games, okay? A more valid form of argumentation might be eat your peas because your body needs the vitamins they provide, all right? There's actually a cause and effect relationship there. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that your mom has been wrong all these years, okay? She controls the video games, right? So she makes the rules. But the bottom line is it's a threat. All it is, it's a threat. So you need to identify mere threats when they're presented to you. The next one is argument from authority. There's absolutely nothing wrong with someone who's an authority on one topic speaking about that topic. That doesn't mean you have to accept everything the authority says, but it does mean you should listen to it. Okay? So an authority on Shakespeare speaking about Shakespeare is in his or her field. An authority on Shakespeare speaking generally about 16th or 17th century drama is in his or her field. Or 16th or 17th century England is in his or her field. And the field's getting broader and broader. But they're still kind of in the ballpark here. But a Shakespeare scholar talking about the war in Iraq is not. Okay, so let's bring it home. Let's make it personal. Epidemiologists are specialists in viruses. Okay, they are the authorities. All right, general practitioners, just an MD, they're not specialists in anything. They get all their information about viruses from epidemiologists. Okay, so if an MD is arguing with an epidemiologist, that's an example of the argument from authority as a logical fallacy. Okay, they are not the experts here. All right, you need to understand that expertise has varying degrees of specificity. Just because someone's smart, that doesn't mean they're right. You have to have expertise in the specific field in which you're speaking to be making valid claims. And to make a valid claim in the sense that this person is an authority in this field and you should listen to them. Okay, a medical doctor is not a specialist in virus transmission or infectious diseases. Epidemiologists are. That's why you listen to the specialists first. Okay, so a false argument from authority is appealing to someone who has authority in one field as an authority when they're actually not speaking in the area of their expertise. Begging the question is arguing in a circle. All right, the point you're trying to prove is assumed to be true by the evidence or the arguments you give as proof. All right, so Bill always tells the truth because he is an honest person. That's like saying the same thing in different words. You're repeating yourself. That's begging the question. An honest person always tells the truth. So that's almost like saying Bill is an honest person because he's an honest person. That is not an argument. Changing the words that you use, saying the same thing twice with different words is not to present a logical argument. That's a fallacy, okay? That happens a lot too. Argument from ignorance. Oh, I love this one. Something is assumed to be true or false because of a lack of evidence that supposedly proves it to be true or false. You cannot prove that God exists, therefore God does not exist. Or you cannot prove that God does not exist, therefore God exists. Right? Lack of evidence for either of those is not proof of anything. Okay? It only means that you can't come to any conclusion at all merely based upon available evidence. All right? So I could say I'm the secret head of the Illuminati, which is a secret worldwide organization that's controlling all world governments and secretly guiding the course of world history. And I'm doing this whole professor thing as a cover-up. I actually control all the newspapers and all the governments. And I control them so well, they erase any evidence of my control. This is exactly how conspiracy theories work. Okay, they fabricate evidence or they point to a lack of evidence as proof, okay? The only word for that is nonsense. It's a logical fallacy. Join the bandwagon appeal is you should do it because everyone is doing it. It's very common in commercials advertising specific products. Coke and Pepsi and Dr. Pepper. I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? Look, everyone drinks Dr. Pepper, so you should too. This is one that your mom was right about, okay? So if your mom ever asks you, well, if so-and-so jumped off a cliff, would you do it? She was right. Just because everyone's doing it does not mean that you should do it, okay? And we're having this discussion with my daughters right now. My 14-year-old daughter's like, my mom does not understand that I am the only person who has her phone taken away at night. Yeah, that's right. Or my 10-year-old. I'm the only 10-year-old that's not allowed to wear makeup in the whole world. Yeah, that's right. It's learn to live with it, man. Argumentum ad hominem is attacking the person instead of examining their reasoning. Man, we're in the middle of a political and election cycle right now, so you better be able to relate to this. I mean, you should. But this has two forms. One is a direct insult. Don't listen to his tax plan. He cheated on his wife. Okay. Now you may legitimately not want to vote for someone who cheated on his wife as president or senator or whatever, for whatever reason. You might see it as a character flaw, and maybe you don't want to trust that person for that reason, and that's not unreasonable. That's okay. Okay. But the fact that someone cheated on his wife has nothing to do with the value of their tax plan. Okay. No matter what the legislation is, you have to examine the legislation on its own merits. You have to examine the political platform on its own merits. You may not want to vote for someone who lacks moral authority or is demonstrably lacking in character, and I wouldn't blame you for that, but that's separate from a direct evaluation of their platform or anything else. Okay. Now, the other kind, so it's direct insult is one. The second is circumstantial, meaning there are some circumstances that are attached to this person that make you distrust them. So don't read that newspaper, it's left wing, or don't read that newspaper, it's right wing. Okay? So obviously left and right wing newspapers are biased, right? But remember, I already told you that your biases, and this is my opinion, I suggested to you that your biases were actually part of what formed the value of your opinion. They're your individual views of the world. Okay? So while it may be in the political best interest of allowing a newspaper or magazine to attack a right-wing figure and vice versa, a right wing to attack a left-wing figure, that doesn't mean that merely for that reason the attacks are not valid. You still have to go and evaluate the evidence and the arguments. Okay, vested interest does not mean false. That's a logical fallacy. It's ad hominem circumstantial. It's like saying, don't accept your dentist's recommendation for Crest toothpaste. She owns stock in the company. Okay. While it may be true it's in her interest for you to buy Crest toothpaste if she owns stock, the total number of her customers probably will not increase the value of her stock. And maybe she owns stock because she believes in the product. All right. So that by itself is not enough. Vested interest is not proof that you can't trust a person's claims. You have to examine the claims on their own merit. That's the point. False cause is just a mistaken cause-effect relationship. It relies only upon a positive correlation between two events to establish a cause and effect relationship. A positive correlation means when this thing happens, this other thing also happens. And depending on the frequency, there's a number associated with it. So positive correlation of 1, every time this happens, this other thing happens. Now, while it may seem common sense to say one must cause the other, that by itself is not enough. A positive correlation does not establish a cause-effect relationship. It may be a sign of a cause-effect relationship, but by itself, it's not proof. It may be true that maybe both of these things are simultaneously being caused by a third thing. and they may be unrelated to each other in any other way. Or it may be coincidence, and maybe you haven't examined enough instances of it. Okay? That's false cause. Complex question asks a question that usually demands a yes or no answer that assumes something else is true to begin with. For example, have you quit cheating on your taxes? There is no way to win answering that question yes or no, right? If you say yes, you're admitting that you have in the past. And if you know, you're admitting that you're continuing to cheat in the present. Okay? What do you think about that girl at the party, all right? If you're a guy and your wife or girlfriend asks you that question, if you give her an answer, that means you know exactly what girl she's talking about, and she knows you noticed her, right? So that's a complex question. These questions are traps. All right. You are allowed to refuse to answer questions like this. You can say, that's a dishonest question. All right. Accident and hasty generalization kind of occur in pairs. Accident refuses to acknowledge exceptions to a general rule. Because drinking alcohol is legal, all people should be allowed to drink. Okay? Well, that's not true. I mean, some people have demonstrable ability to control their drinking. They're called alcoholics, and they should not drink. All right? Some people are too young to be drinking. Maybe they don't have the maturity yet. And maybe they should not be allowed to drink. We can argue about what age is too young. That's different. But that's different from also saying everyone should just be allowed to drink. All right? Hasty generalization is the opposite of accident. It turns an exception into a general rule. Because some people are alcoholics, no one should be allowed to drink. Okay? The fact is, rules have exceptions. That doesn't mean they cease to be valid rules, general truths. And that doesn't mean the exceptions are the rule. Okay? Fallacies of ambiguity, those are the fallacies of relevance. Fallacies of ambiguity are the second kind of informal, sorry, I got to edit that, not information, but informal logical fallacies. They're based upon an ambiguity in language. And they all capitalize on the fact that words have more than one meaning, generally. Equivocation is using the same word with a different meaning within the same argument. A feather is light. What is light cannot be dark. Therefore, a feather cannot be dark. Now, you notice the form of the argument is valid. It's correct. Okay? But the word light changes meaning. The term changes, right? The distributed term changes meaning. In the first sentence, the term refers to weight. In the second sentence, the term refers to light, meaning vision. Okay? So the word changes meaning. And so equivocation is using the same words with two different meanings to arrive at a conclusion that really has nothing to do with anything. Next is amphibole, grammatical ambiguity. Okay, the grammar of the sentence is ambiguous. So there's a famous oracle given that if the king of Greece goes to war against the king of Persia, the great kingdom will be destroyed. Okay, so the king of Greece heard that and said, yes, I'm going to win. And of course, he got whooped. All right. It didn't say which great kingdom would be destroyed, just that a great kingdom would be destroyed. So that's a grammatical ambiguity. I once shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got in my pajamas, I'll never know. These are kind of Groucho Marx jokes at this point, but that's okay. We can run with these. No food is better than our food. Okay. Does that mean you're better off not eating at all than eating their food? I've been to restaurants like that. Does that mean that no other restaurant has food better than theirs? Okay. Used cars for sale. Why go elsewhere to be cheated? Come here first. Let us cheat you first. Okay. And people can take advantage of that to make you sound like, or make someone else sound like they're saying something that they didn't mean. Okay, that's what's really important. That's where it works in an argument. Accusing somebody of saying something they didn't mean by messing around with the facts of ambiguity of language. Now, accent is varying stresses on a sentence that can change the meaning of the sentence. So all of these sentences, all 5 of these sentences are grammatically the same words in the same order, okay? But if you stress the words differently, they mean something a little different. We should not speak ill of our friends. When you stress a verb, it almost sounds like you're going to do it anyhow, right? We should not speak ill of our friends. Maybe that other person out there can do it for us. We should not speak ill of our friends, but we can put it in print, right? We should not speak ill of our friends, but other people's friends are fair game. We should not speak ill of our friends, but they're just acquaintances. Well, they're fair game too, okay? So the implication of the sentence changes depending on which word you stress, okay? It's a little bit harder to pick up in a written text sometimes, but this still exists. Think about what's really being stressed when you encounter sentences like these. Quotation out of context. Change the meaning of a quoted sentence by removing significant context. He said he would ban all fracking. So maybe the original quotation was, we should reduce our dependence upon oil using these measures, and then once we get to a certain point, ban all fracking because it can pollute the groundwater. Okay, so someone tries to say something nuanced that indicates a plan, and someone just takes 3 words out of that, ban all fracking. Okay, that's quotation out of context. You have to look at everything a person is saying in context to know what they really meant. The final one is composition and division. Again, they're in pairs because they're kind of opposite versions of the same thing. Composition assumes the whole has the qualities of its parts. So let's say you go to a store, you meet one nasty, rude, bad employee, and you assume the whole company is bad. That's a completely natural thing to feel. We've probably all been through that before. But actually, the company could be pretty good. Maybe that one person is a jerk or had a bad day. Okay? Division is assuming the part has the qualities of the whole. Okay? So you know for a fact that this company is great, so you assume every single individual with working for it will be great too. And again, they may have some bad apples, all right? So those are the fallacies of ambiguity. And remember, what I'd like you to do for your discussion forum post this week is find 2 of those logical fallacies out in the wild and post examples of them and explain how the example fits a specific kind of logical fallacy. When you write your rhetorical analysis paper, you're going to have to identify these logical fallacies yourself. Thank you.